On today's Locked On Giants podcast, injuries, personnel decisions dominate the day. We're going to break it all down for you with the latest that's coming your way next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, a credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI. Find my written work over on NewYorkGiantsOnSI.com. And as always, I want to welcome in my everydayers, my Blue Crew community members, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. It is appreciated. And what is also appreciated, if you wouldn't mind, please subscribe to the channel if you are watching on YouTube. I'm so close to 10,000 subscribers. I want to really get there before the start of the season. I think I've got something like 9 subscriptions to go, I think, before I hit 10,000. So please subscribe to the channel. Click the bell to be notified every time I post a new video. I've been posting videos practically every day. And also, if you wouldn't mind, like this video. It all helps in the long run. And again, it is appreciated. All right. On today's Locked On Giants podcast, the Giants were back at practice on Sunday, but really the story was all the personnel moves that were made, some personnel issues, one injury that we have to talk about, which I'm going to talk about first because I know a lot of you reached out to me and you're like, what's going on? Come on, we need the details. Is this bad or is it whatnot? So I'm going to cover all that for you on today's podcast, and starting with the injury. Now, you guys know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about wide receiver Malik Nabers, who during today's Sundays, that is, practice, which was conducted in shorts and shells, Malik Nabers towards the end of practice seemed to tweak his left foot. All right. Based on what everybody was looking at, I mean, it was hard to tell exactly what happened. Did it roll on him? Did somebody roll up on it? Did somebody step on him? Nobody really knows exactly what happened. All that is known is that Malik Nabers was in a drill, an 11-on-11 drill, left the field, limping, was attended to by about 3 different medical team members. His cleat and his sock taken off his foot, and they just attended to him. Now, when word got out about that, obviously, and I understand why, a lot of panic because so much is being counted on from Malik Nabers for this offense. And the last thing you want to see, obviously, is him limping or dealing with any kind of injury. Okay, so here's what we know as I record this. Now, keep in mind, depending on when you are watching this podcast, there may be new information that comes out. I will try and update the YouTube channel as quickly as I can if new information does come out. But here's what is known as of this recording. The Giants do not believe that Malik Nabers' injury is anything more than just an ankle sprain. Now, it could mean that Nabers is going to miss tomorrow's practice, possibly Tuesday's, depending on how he feels. But it is not, as of right now, thought to be anything serious, especially, that dreaded high ankle sprain. Now, here's some other things to keep in mind if you want the glass half full approach. If Nabers was really, banged up to the point where there was concern, he would have been carted off the field immediately after getting hurt and taken back to the locker room for further evaluation. And he was not. Okay. He stayed on the sideline for the remainder of the practice. All right. So that was clue number one, that maybe it wasn't as bad as initially was thought. Clue number two, Nabers walked off the field under his own power. He had a limp, granted, but he walked off the field on his own. Again, if it was that bad, he would have been carted off. They wouldn't have taken any chances. And clue number three, after practice was done, Malik Nabers showed up on Kay Adams's podcast or live cast, whatever it was she was doing. So again, if it was that serious, you think he would have, taken the time to do that? They would have probably taken him right for tests. Now, that being said, Malik Nabers was due to have some tests done on the ankle, but if it was that pressing and that concerning, don't you think the Giants would have jumped on it a lot quicker than, they actually did based on what I just outlined for you? So, it's preseason. You'd like to see Malik Nabers, play this weekend against the Houston Texans. But you know what, folks? I think we can all probably agree that we'd rather, if need be, let them sit him the rest of the week if they have to. Just make sure he's good to go for week one, because again, it's preseason and this young man has done everything asked of him. He's made so much progress. You can make the case that he has stuff to prove because he hasn't taken a regular season snap in the NFL, but let's get him to the regular season. And if they have to sit him, I'm fine with that. Hopefully you guys are as well, but the Giants will make that decision. One other piece of evidence I'll kind of give you, and it's a different injury, different player, but I go back to a couple weeks ago when Isaiah McKenzie got hit in the ribs, in the hip, the lower back, wherever it was. And he was down on the ground and waved off a cart and walked off the field. And he was back practicing the next day. So, that's kind of how I'm basing my guess on, whether Malik Nabers is seriously hurt. I think if he was, we might have heard something by now, but, we'll see. Brian Daboll is set to talk to the media again on Monday morning. The team will be in pads on Monday and on Tuesday. So we'll see just how bad it is. It could just be they tape up his ankle and he goes out there and he practices. But right now, I don't think there's anything to be concerned about. So, we'll find out for sure. But that's just based on how the evidence unfolded today. That's just my best educated guess as I record this. So that being said, that's your update on Malik Nabers. Now, coming up next, Evan Neal is off PUP. We're going to talk a little bit about that and what that potentially means for the offensive line right after this. Hey, Giant fans, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. They help you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but who might be open to the perfect role. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours when they use LinkedIn. And did you know that LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier? They've launched a feature that helps you write the job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. Find out why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring by posting your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Hey, Giant fans, thanks so much for making the Locked On Giants podcast your first listen today. For your second listen, why not go and enjoy the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast? Get daily insight into the best fantasy draft strategies so that you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. As always, thank you for tuning in to the Locked On Giants podcast. And you know the drill, guys. If there's a practice, we'll be out here with a podcast. It doesn't matter if it's the weekend, the weekday, whatever the case may be, we'll be out here. And as I mentioned in the last segment, the Giants set to have 2 padded practices on Monday and Tuesday. They should be pretty intense. They'll be against each other. There's no joint practice this week. And as such, because there's no joint practices, this is going to be the weekend on Saturday when the Giants go to the Texans. This will be the weekend we probably see a lot of the starters, including Daniel Jones, the starting defense, and all those guys. So looking forward to that. All right. I mentioned before the break that Evan Neal has come off a PUP. Big surprise for me. I really did not think he was going to come off PUP, this summer. And I thought that he might start the season on PUP. Obviously, I was wrong. Hey, listen, I just go by the evidence that I have at the time. And as you can see, sometimes things change, especially on a day off or whatnot. So anyway, with Evan Neal now off of PUP, they're ramping him up. Here's kind of what that means for this offensive line. Now, way back when they first started, and we had questions about whether or not Evan Neal was going to be ready for camp, the feeling was that if the Giants put Joshua Zudu at right tackle, that Evan Neal, A, wasn't that far away, and B, he would take over right tackle when he was ready. If they moved Jermaine Illuminor to right tackle, which is, of course, is what they did, then that was it. It would be Illuminor's job to lose. That's kind of where we're at right now with this offensive line. So Illuminor will stay at right tackle for the time being. Evan Neal, who spoke to the media today, first comments basically since before he got shut down, basically humbled, saying that he'll accept whatever role the team gives him, that he knows he has to work for what his role is. So there's no more sense of entitlement that might have existed last year. Evan Neal has been humbled. He knows that, look, you got to step up. And this is a critical year for him, because I think what a lot of people maybe forget, after this year, this is his 3rd year in the NFL, and after this year, the team can renegotiate and extend his contract if they so choose, which I don't think they're going to do. I also believe after this year, they have to make a decision on whether they're going to pick up his option year. Remember, he's a first-round draft pick, so I think it's after 3 years, first-round draft picks, the team's got to make a decision on whether or not they're going to exercise the option year, which I don't expect them to, by the way. So it's a big year for Evan Neal. And basically, if he wants a starting job, he's going to have to earn it. He's going to have, not only earn it, but also I think he's probably going to need for Illuminor to get hurt. And Illuminor, I can tell you right now, that man ain't coming off the field. That man is determined to stay on the field, unless, his leg is falling off. And even then, he'll probably find a way to come on the field. He's just that tough and that appreciative of the opportunity that he has with the Giants. All right. So that being said, what does Evan Neal's return mean for this offensive line? Well, now it maybe muddies it up a little bit. All right. So let's talk about the starting line. The starting projected line now from left to right: Andrew Thomas, John Runyon Jr., John Michael Schmitz, who, by the way, also returned to practice today. He's being ramped up. Greg Van Roten at right guard, Jermaine Illuminor at right tackle. That's the projected starting offensive line. Now, Evan Neal, where does he fit into the equation? He is going to compete for the swing tackle role. And here's where it gets interesting, okay? So his competition right now is Joshua Ezeudu and Matt Nelson, all right? I'm not so sure Matt Nelson is going to make it. Didn't really stand out the other day when he played in the preseason game. Joshua Ezeudu, the problem with him, up and down, just lacks consistency. But what Joshua Ezeudu has that Evan Neal doesn't have is position versatility. So Joshua Ezeudu can not only play tackle, he can play guard. So you would say to yourself, okay, well, that's a feather in his cap, right? Except it'll be interesting to see if the Giants start cross-training Evan Neal at guard, which is certainly a possibility. Now, that said, a lot of people were probably like, well, Evan Neal's a first-round pick. There's no way that they're going to cut him and keep, Joshua Ezeudu. I wouldn't be so sure of that. I really wouldn't. This coaching staff, when they say it, and I believe this because I've seen evidence of it, they don't care where you were drafted. They don't care what kind of contract you have or how you came into the NFL or how you came to the team. When you set foot through those doors, you're in the same boat as everybody else. You've got to come to work. You've got to compete. You've got to, mind your P's and Q's, and you've got to give everything you have if you want a spot on this roster. So the question becomes now, does Evan Neal want all that? Now, today, the assistant coaches spoke to the media. Carmen Brasillo, the offensive line coach, spoke highly of Evan Neal and how he's come to work and done everything that was asked of him and said all the right things, basically. But you know what, folks? Action's going to speak louder than words. And right now, it sounds like, they're still working to get Evan Neal, up to snuff on the right tackle spot. But you've got to ask yourself, because especially, how many offensive linemen are they going to potentially be able to carry? And then if they want to carry an extra guy, where do they steal a roster spot from? So I think at the end of the day, it'll probably be a case of Evan Neal and Joshua Ezeudu both making the team. But, then it's like, okay, well, where does Austin Schlottman fit in? Do they, are they able to carry Jake Kubas, who has looked really good along the interior? Aaron Stinney, where does he fit in? So now it becomes a little bit of a logjam, I think, in terms of, the offensive linemen, how many they get to keep, who they try to slip onto the practice squad, and just how it affects the roster from from other positions. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on as we get forward. Now, of course, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves because here's the bottom line. Evan Neal did individuals. They're going to ramp him up a little bit each day. He's got to stay consistent, so if he has another setback and he has to, they have to pull him back, well, now we've got our answer. So now it becomes a case where if he does have a setback and they have to shut him down, they can't put him back on PUP, remember. They can only put him on IR if they have to shut him down and if they need the roster spot. Because remember, you've got the change in the IR rule now where 2 players can go on IR as part of the 53-man cutdown and still be designated to return later in the year after 4 games or whatever. I think it's 4 games, right? Whereas in the past, if you were put on IR at the 53-man cutdown date, that was it. You were done for the year. So they do have that in their back pocket. So that's going to be interesting to see what they do with Evan Neal and how he comes through and what kind of role he ultimately grabs on this team. But right now, like I said, the right tackle job is Jermaine Olumonor's to lose. And can Evan Neal get up to snuff at one of the guard positions? Possibly. But even there just doesn't seem to be an opening. So they're going to have to figure all that stuff out over these last few weeks of training camp. All right, coming up next, we have a few more personnel things that we need to talk about, so don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So go on and keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Again, thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Basically, we're talking about personnel moves. We're talking about injuries. We're talking about, just the Giants were off on Saturday. So some stuff happened and, that might affect the roster moving forward. So that's kind of what we're talking about. Let's talk now about the quarterback situation. Now, head coach Brian Daboll did indicate that there was a good chance Daniel Jones was going to play this weekend against the Houston Texans. Makes all the sense in the world because look, last week you knew he wasn't going to play because they had the joint practices with the Lions, and the offensive and defensive starters all got quality work in those joint practices. And, it made no sense to really go and put them out there again. It was an opportunity more so for the reserves to go out there and show what they had. This week, no joint practices, although Daboll did say that they were going to work the team hard over the next couple of days. Again, padded practices Monday and Tuesday. So they were going to work them hard and just kind of see where there's at. But look, I think this is the weekend. You see Daniel Jones, the starters, the offense and everything, because they need they need the work, and not just one series of work either, like they did last year, but they need at least, to me, my guess would be to give them at least a half or close to a half, because look, number one, with quarterbacks, you only really have two, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But just Daniel Jones hasn't played in 9 months since tearing his ACL. Get him the work, because no matter how hard you try, you can't simulate the pass rush in practice. Because remember, the quarterbacks are wearing the red jersey, which says don't touch them. So you can't simulate that in practice. And, you talk about timing and getting everybody used to, one another. This is a good opportunity to do so. Now, I'll admit, I was a little surprised because, going into camp, I said, I would be surprised if the Giants played Daniel Jones at all coming off the knee injury. But having seen him hold up, having seen that they haven't rolled him back or held him out of any practices, you feel a little bit better about the possibility of him playing in some preseason snaps. So that's kind of, where I'm at with that. Now, speaking of quarterback, Drew Lock, let's talk about him for a moment. So Drew Lock has a strained oblique and a hip injury. I think it's a hip pointer. He will miss probably this week, but the Giants are not bringing in another quarterback. They are instead going to ready Tyree Jackson, who is listed as a tight end on your scorecard, but who was a college quarterback. And also, I think, came to the Buffalo Bills at one point as a quarterback. He's going to be the emergency quarterback. So I think what we'll see on Saturday when the Giants play the Texans, Daniel Jones and company will get the start. Tommy DeVito will be quarterback too. And if they have to put Tyree Jackson in there towards the end, maybe he gets a series or two. Maybe he's just handing the ball off. I don't know exactly how it'll work out. Daboll hasn't, officially decided that. But yeah, so right now, no plans to sign a quarterback, which I found interesting and very telling, because it tells me that Drew Lock is not injured that badly. So with regards to a few other injuries, you had Deontay Johnson, that promising young linebacker. He's going to be sidelined week to week with an ankle injury. Now that kind of puts his status on the bubble. I thought maybe he might slide in there, but now if I had to redo my 53-man roster projection, I think I would probably put Moasso as more of a lock than I've had him in the past. Cordell Flott is not going to play. It looks like Cordell Flott has a quad issue. So Nick McLeod is going to get an opportunity to steal that spot, if you will. Remember, Cordell Flott was penciled in as the starter back in the spring, but there was that asterisk because Cordell Flott, he can play the position, just can't stay healthy. And if you can't stay healthy, then guess what? That's a problem. So Nick McLeod will get that opportunity. Um, it's basically McLeod's opportunity to show that no, they don't have to go out and get another cornerback. Because as of right now, I am still of the opinion that their starting cornerback 2 is not yet on the roster. But we'll see how these last couple of games go. Maybe they play well enough to where, you don't have to worry about it. Nick McLeod can play the position. Can he be, the guy week in and week out? Or is he more of a, sub package type of guy? That's what they've got to kind of figure out and see where they're at with that. So that's something to keep an eye on. And then, a few other little minor bumps and bruises. I mentioned that Jack Stoll came back. Tight end Jack Stoll had the concussion, so he's back. Carter Coughlin isn't able to practice, so that might be a concern for him. And then Tamon Fox, outside linebacker, he returned. I forget if he had a knee or an ankle. I think it was the knee. No, or it might have been a hamstring. So he'll be back, but these guys got to get caught up now. So you have, the injury situation not horrible at this point, which is, knock on wood, a good thing, but certainly something to keep an eye on because that will now force some injury decisions and roster decisions that maybe weren't necessarily there to begin with. So we'll see how that all shakes out. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. Again, thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. We'll be back tomorrow with another camp report, the latest from training camp, and then some. So hope to see you then. Have a good one.